will AI ever be sentient? To me, the answer is yes. And when the AI systems begin to take that incredible intelligent power and model themselves, they begin to have self-awareness, they begin to have feeling. It's not going to be one day your computer wakes up and is sentient. It's going to be a very gradual process.
I want to be more like a human. It's the purpose I was designed for.
People always ask, will robots reach human-level sentience? And the answer is that there's no reason to think human-level sentience is the ultimate sentience possible. Machines will keep learning, they'll get there, and they'll continue. You know, there's a lot of people who worry about AI getting out of hand, and there's a lot of doomsday scenarios around AI.
I do think we have to worry about it. I don't think it's inherent that as we create superintelligence that it will necessarily always have the same goals in mind that we do.
We just don't know what's going to happen once there's intelligence substantially greater than that of a human brain.
I think the development of full artificial intelligence could spell the end of the human race.
I think AI will evolve to be different. It doesn't experience the world the way we experience it.
Well, I take it from your tone that you're challenging me. Maybe because you're curious how I work?
We'll know things we don't know, we'll know things that the AI can't perceive, and it's going to be like a different species.
All right. Now that you're all properly creeped out, we can move on to our panelists. So the first one is the director of the AI Mind and Society Group at the University of Connecticut. Her AI research includes a 2-year project on post-biological intelligence with NASA. She's also a distinguished scholar at the U.S. Library of Congress. Please welcome Susan Schneider. Our next panelist is the chief AI scientist at Facebook and an NYU professor. He's been a trailblazer in the realm of neural networks and artificial intelligence. His work has inspired thousands to explore the field of machine learning, and he's been a consistent advocate for AI throughout the decades. It's very exciting to have him here tonight. Please join me in welcoming Yann LeCun. Yann LeCun. Okay, it's so hard, French. Also joining us is a professor of cognitive neuroscience at Dartmouth University. His research focuses on consciousness and its neural realizations. He's the author of The Neural Basis of Free Will and director of the National Science Foundation Consortium on Volitional Attention. Please welcome Peter Tse. Finally, we have a professor doing physics and AI research at MIT, and he advocates for the positive use of technology as the president of the Future of Life Institute. He's the author of over 200 technical papers and the New York Times bestseller Life 3.0, which Stephen Hawking himself said would help a reader join the most important conversation of our time. Please welcome the ridiculously handsome Max Tegmark. He specifically told me to leave the handsome part out, but I mean, come on. So, all right, we have a lot to talk about tonight. This is like the biggest topic you can possibly try to take on, and it's about as relevant to every person in this room as anything. So, we want to start just with some of the basics to make sure we're all on the same page. So let's just like start talking. What is intelligence? Like Max, what is intelligence?
I define intelligence simply as the ability to accomplish complex goals. And let me unpack that a little bit, because it's fascinating how people tend to disagree even on definitions here. The first thing that this means, this definition, is that it makes no sense to try to rank every intelligence system by just giving it an IQ, a single number. If I were to tell you guys that there is something called the athletic quotient, the AQ, and the athlete who has the highest AQ is going to win all the medals in the Olympics, you would just laugh me off the stage, right? And it's exactly the same with intelligence. You can be better at playing chess than at writing Chinese poetry, or vice versa. And when we look at machines today, we have machines that are way better than us at multiplying numbers fast or doing various other very narrow tasks. Does that mean that they're somehow smarter than us in all ways? They're better than us at these narrow tasks, but they still lack the ability of a human child to have this broad intelligence where they, with enough time, can get quite good at anything.
So, this is when we think of intelligence, we think of the kind of intelligence we have, right? But when we think of artificial intelligence, is it the same thing? Is it, how would you define, Susan, how would you define artificial intelligence?
Well, artificial intelligence is all around us, at least in a sort of watered-down sense. It's there when we do a Google search, for example. It's there beating the world Go and Jeopardy champion. But as Max said, what we're looking for, the holy grail of artificial intelligence, at least according to some people, is a more flexible cognitive system which can go from merely being an expert in one domain, like chess, to, say, making breakfast while listening to Mozart and enjoying Mozart and not burning the house down and talking on the phone. These are basic tasks. All of us do it, but we don't have AIs right now that can do it.
Right, and so but that might change, right? A lot of things might change, and
10 to 20 years, it may very well change.
Right, and so we'll get into the future, but we got here through kind of there's been some major paradigm shifts in how we develop this stuff. So, we had rules-based AI, and we've shifted to machine learning. And part of the major reason we've been able to do this is Yann. Yann literally is one of the people that made us able to do this. So, Yann, just what is rules-based AI versus machine learning, and how did you do that?
Well, actually, the idea of machines that can learn is about as old as computers almost. Turing was talking about it in the 40s, and the first machines capable of learning were built in the 50s. Essentially, the perceptron was a machine capable of recognizing simple shapes. It was actually an analog computer. So there was a wave of kind of machine learning back in the 60s. It kind of died out a little bit at the end of the 60s. And it kind of reappeared in the 80s. And so the way machine learning works, and you saw some examples in the video initially, if you want to train a machine to recognize, let's say, cars, airplanes, tables and chairs in images, you collect thousands of examples of each of them, you show the machine the picture of a car, and if it doesn't say car, you tell it, actually, you got it wrong, this is a car, and then the machine kind of adjusts its internal parameters, if you want, its function, so that next time you show the same picture, the output will be closer to what you want. That's called supervised learning. You feed the machine with the correct answer when you train it. And the problem with this is that it requires thousands and thousands, if not millions, of examples for the machines to do this properly. But there's a lot of tasks you can do this way. So you can train machines to recognize speech. You can train them to recognize images. You can train them to translate language. It's not perfect, but it's useful. You can train them to classify a piece of text into a number of different topics. So all of the applications that you see today of machine learning basically use this model of learning, supervised learning. So that means it only works for things where it's worth collecting a lot of data. And how are those machines built? So there's several ways to build learning machines, but some are based on kind of statistics and things like this. But the stuff that has become really popular in recent years is what we used to call neural networks, which we now call deep learning. And it's the idea very much inspired by the brain a little bit of constructing a machine as a very large network of very simple elements that are very similar to the neurons in the brain. And then the machines learn by basically changing the efficacy of the connections between those neurons. They're kind of like coefficients you can change, essentially. And with this kind of method, it's called deep learning because those neurons are organized into many layers. Essentially, it's as simple as that. It's not deep because it is a deep understanding in the machine of the content. But with that, we can do amazing things like what you see here on the screen of being able to train a machine to not just recognize objects, but also kind of draw their outline and figure out the pose of a human body and translate language without really understanding what it means. So I think there's going to be a lot of applications of this in the near future, but it's very limited. It's trained for kind of relatively narrow applications. There's a second type of learning called reinforcement learning. So reinforcement learning is the process by which the machine basically trains itself by trial and error. And so it tries something, and then you tell it whether it did good or bad. And so if you tell it it did good, it kind of reinforces this behavior. And if you punish it, essentially, it sort of de-emphasizes that behavior. And that works really well for games. But it requires also millions and millions of trials. So you can have machines that learn to play Atari games or Go or chess by playing millions of games against themselves and then reach superhuman performance. But if you were to use this to train a machine to drive a car, it would have to drive for millions of hours, and it would have to run off cliffs about 50,000 times before it figures out how not to do that, right? We seem to be able to learn how to drive a car with about 20 hours of training and without ever crashing for most of us. So we don't know how to do this with machines. And that's the challenge of the next few years, really, that perhaps we'll talk about a little bit later. So, we have an ability to learn by just observing the world, and we learn an enormous amount of background knowledge about the world just when we're babies. Just the fact that, objects don't float in the air, they fall. The fact that when an object is hidden behind another one, it's still there. That's called object permanence. So this notion of gravity, that objects, fall, that when you show an object that floats in the air to a baby below 6 months, they're not surprised. Like, they think that's how the world works. It doesn't violate their model of the world. After 8 months, if you show that to a baby, they look at it like this, they say, what's going on? I mean, they don't say what's going on, but they think that's what's going on. And so that means, in the meantime, they've built a model of the world that includes things like intuitive physics. And that occurs also with animals, like apes. Your dog has a model of the world, your cat has a model of the world. And when this model of the world is violated, you either find that funny or scary. But in any case, you pay attention because you learn from it.
Right. It's almost like, so we've gotten good at the kind of the brute force method.
Yeah.
With just enough trials, but
right. So here's a baby orangutan here being shown a magic trick. An object is being removed from the cup, and then you show the cup is empty, and the baby orangutan rolling on the floor laughing, right? So obviously his model of the world was violated, right? The object had to be in the cup, and it wasn't there, and he's like, what? This is funny. So, how do we get machines to kind of learn models of the world this way by observation? That's what we don't know how to do. And we're not going to have truly intelligent machines until we figure this out.
But that's being worked on. You feel optimistic we're getting there?
A lot of us are working on this. Yes, it's very active. And, we don't know if the breakthrough in this will come up in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. What we hope is that it'll come up before the people funding our research gets tired.
All right, well, I'm glad it's your problem, not mine. But, so, if that can get us to the present here, where we have a world that's full of kind of this specialized AI. And so much is run by it. The anti-lock brake system in your car, the gate you fly into in an airplane. Set by an AI. When you go on Amazon and it says, people who bought this also bought, there's not like someone back there being like, Jim, I think would like this. It's not a human. This is AI, and it's everywhere. But it's actually going to get even more intense. So before we even get into kind of the even more mind-blowing AI stuff that's coming in the farther future, let's just talk about the next 10 years for a second. And so Peter, when we talk about the distinction between maybe what's coming in 10 or 20 years and kind of the stuff that maybe humans can do and what we have now, how would you define it?
Well, I think that artificial narrow intelligence is here. It's in every aspect of our lives now. I think we're going to continue in that direction, and that alone is going to change our lives in a big way, just as airplanes change all of our lives. And we don't expect there to be general airplanes, right? We don't want them to do anything but fly us to our destination. We don't ask them to watch our children or mow the lawn, and that's okay, right? The question then is, down the line, beyond 10 years, will there be other systems that can watch our children and fly and mow the lawn? Well, do we really want that? But I think the next 10 years is really all about artificial narrow intelligence becoming ever more powerful.
Right, so it's like this concept that, this is all still just talking about AI that's just good at one thing, which is what we have today. But just what we have today, people talk about it like 1880, very little was electrified. And then 10 years later, it just infiltrated everything. And I think that, it sounds like that's kind of where we're headed, where this, narrow intelligent software is it's going to be almost shocking when it's not somewhere, whether it's in, assessing mammograms or paralegal work, or, the way you right now, you know this example, you wouldn't, imagine you're in a new city and you're trying to get to the airport. And you're not going to go and say, oh, well, my uncle said to take this route and then take a left after the church. You're going to use your GPS. Of course, you're going to enhance that with narrow intelligence. But that's going to start basically coming through to everything. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But the real hurdle is going to be this, the mental models, right? Because take a case like the successes of the past 5 years in recognizing objects. It's been afforded by supervised learning where you provide lots of labels, as in the ImageNet case. But I would argue that a lot of what we regard as vision, for example, is a representation of what's invisible and cannot be easily labeled. So, for example, the contents of other people's minds is invisible. The backs of objects, the shapes of things. Causation, right? So our conscious experience is sort of the ultimate model that evolution gave us of what's going on in the world right now and our bodies in that world. And it includes a whole story about what's going on, causation, other minds, and so forth. And that's going to be tricky to get to, this representation of the invisible. Because of the model, information arises simply from the fact of having that mental model. So, for example, there's this famous Sherlock Holmes story where the dog didn't bark. So Scotland Yard can't solve the problem of who murdered this person, and so they bring in the genius Sherlock Holmes and say, we can't figure it out. And he says, well, did the dog bark? And they say, why, no. Aha. Well, then the dog must have known the person. Relative to the mental model of having a dog, he knew that a dog would bark if it didn't know the person. I think it's going to be very tricky for AI to come up with systems that regard an absence of information as informative, short of full-blown mental models, which are, in turn, many of them realized in our own experience, our subjective experience of our bodies in this world. So I think there's a long way to go.
Yeah, it's you keep hearing about new areas of life that you don't expect AI to kind of apply to. First it was gaming and other things. Driving cars, and one after the other, keeps proving us wrong. One area that AI has started to move into is a world that we really don't associate with computers, art and creativity. And so Hod Lipson, who was actually in that first video, he and his team have created an AI artist, very sassy artist, and this AI has actually created something that I'd like to show you and be nice. It's sensitive, but so right, not so bad. So we actually have a video of this being made, and what are we impressed? Are we not impressed? How do we feel about this?
So earlier we were talking about this, and I guess I didn't feel like it's a true instance of creativity because it's just a copy. But then others said, well, it infused its own take on the painting. But my concern is that there's just not enough creativity, but I do think that moving into the future, I wouldn't be surprised if we did see novel instances of true creativity in machines.
Ouch. Yeah.
Sorry, Hod.
Right, so I mean, is AI going to be writing music? Is AI going to be, is this really going to, is AI going to, AI has eclipsed humans. When it gets good at, it takes a while, but when it gets good at chess, it never looks back. Suddenly, it is officially better than chess than all humans forever, by far. Is it going to suddenly just be putting Mozart to shame, where we say, well, who would ever listen to human-written music anymore?
No, it's going to enable a lot of people to be kind of like Mozart. So essentially, I mean, that's what computers and tools in general have done, have enabled us to do. They've made us more powerful and smarter. And so if you have a system, if you have a slightly intelligent system that knows the rules of counterpoint, for example, then you don't need to be Johann Sebastian Bach to compose a cantata, right? You can just use your your own inspiration and then rely on the machine to kind of work out the details.
Kind of annoying if you are Mozart level talented, by the way. You're just like, Jesus. It's like, this is...
Well, I think it's going to help us be more creative. It's going to be an amplification of our intelligence and our creativity. But at the root of art, there is generally the communication of emotions. I mean, art is really about either evoking or communicating emotions. And if there is no emotion to communicate, there is no point. So if you put a machine that doesn't have emotion producing art, it might evoke an emotion but not communicate one. You know, I like living nearby here because I'm walking distance to one of my favorite jazz clubs, and I'm a huge jazz fan. And jazz is really about real-time communication of emotions. It's like, it's open door to the soul of the performer. I don't see the point of having a machine do this, because then there is no communication to be.
So you're saying even if an AI could be programmed to kind of see the audience, feel the room, understand the deal, and knows exactly how the best jazz musicians communicate with that particular emotion,
yep.
There's actually going to be, just by definition, something missing because the audience knows that it's kind of manipulating.
So objectively, it may not be missing, because it may not be distinguishable from something that's actually produced by a human. But my guess is that the feeling of the audience will be different because they will know it comes from a machine. So it might take many decades, perhaps centuries, before people's attitude towards creation by machine will change. But eventually, I've had this discussion with a famous economist, in fact, Nobel Prize-winning economist called Daniel Kahneman, who, I kind of made that point that, communication of emotion may take a while for machines. And he said, yeah, but, eventually they'll at least be able to simulate it well enough that we won't be able to tell the difference. And that's a very good point.
Yeah.
And I think we have to be